Yes, it is, of course, our top 20 sports documentary countdown. Do you want me to go from 20 or do you want me to go from 10? You all want me to do the 20?
Go with the flow. Go with the flow.
Our number 20 was Iron Bolt. Our number 19 was Jockey Wilson Said. Our number 18 was Class of 92. 17 was Maradona. Our 16 was The Crazy Gang. 15 was Kipoche, The Last Milestone. Our number 14 was Sir Alex Ferguson, Never Give In. Our 13 was ESPN's 30 by 30. Our 12 was Sunderland Till I Die. 11 was Greavesy. Our 10 was 89. 9 was I Am Duran. Number 8 was Finding Charlton. Our number 7 was Living with the Lions. Our number 6 was Bobby Robson, More Than a Manager. Our number 5 was Graham Taylor, An Impossible Job. And our number 4 is this.
Even afraid to go to work because they know that their workmates will shout abuse and they can't live it down. All they had to boast about was the success of the West Indies team.
To a step beyond the sport, where there's a whole lot of things needed defending rather than the cricket ball itself.
People are building these West Indians up. I'm not really quite sure that they're as good as everyone thinks they are. If they're down, they grovel. And I intend, with the help of Closey and a few others, to make them grovel.
Grovel.
They grovel.
Grovel.
To make them grovel.
That wasn't a clever thing to say.
It really wasn't a clever thing to say. It is, of course. I mean, listen, now that we're down to the last 4, this happened with the Best Sports Drama. It's very difficult. There are hairs between them, basically. It's very difficult to pick.
We've moved them around.
Absolutely. This could have been number 1 for me because it was, without a shadow of a doubt, Vicky will tell you, the biggest influence on I Believe in Miracles for me.
I bet.
I mean, this was almost like my template. It is, of course, Fire in Babylon.
Yes. The
magnificent documentary about the great West Indies team of the 70s and 80s, going into the 90s. It was released in 2010. The director's Stephen Riley. And it's a remarkable story because it's one of the great stories in the history of not just sport, the world. It's got slavery, colonialism, racism, and ultimately victory. So, I mean, you can't top that. It's really difficult to top that coming from another sport. But it really does sort of cover so much history, not just the history of the sport, but the islands themselves. Bringing the islands together to play as a team called the West Indies. Remarkable thing. That's what it teaches you. You don't realise how many islands they are and how many different cultures all come together and play for this team. But I'm just going to mention this before I speak to Mark about it because from 1980 to 1995, they never lost a test series. It's the longest winning streak of any sporting team in the history of the world. Wow. That's how good the West Indies were at that time.
The greatest of all the Invincibles sports teams
ever.
I would certainly argue that as well. Not least of which is because of what they brought by way at the time and the story that they told.
And wow, were they cool doing it?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Did not hurt.
They had the soundtrack, they had the characters, they had the personality. I mean, we'll start with them all right. They brought this amazing sort of regal captaining called Clive Lloyd, who became captain of the West Indies, who recruited players. People have to remember as well, it was quite interesting, me and Mark had a bit of chat, because we look through the prism of coming from Britain and thinking about our teams as being as the centre. You realise that Australia were the other great team of that era, not England. Yeah. It was them the way. And Australia had 2 of the most feared bowlers in the history of the game: Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson.
Quite, and although we hear there from England's captain, with his original South African accent attached, Tony Greig, that era that I remember, because growing up as a teenager watching it was thrilling, because that was when they came over in the summer of the 70s, and the Oval was full of locals, by which I mean West Indian fans, and it was sensational. And what it was is it felt like a game between, there's a sort of brothers in arms quality to it.
Yes.
And when it's that good, Tony Greig's face being rubbed in the dirt for those ridiculous comments. But you then, as you say though, Johnny, then it transfers to the Australian part of the argument.
Yes.
And things got just so sickening and ugly.
Racist, really. I mean, you watched, you loved this, didn't you, because of the music and all the rest of it?
Yeah, I didn't really... we watched it years ago, didn't we? Yeah. And you was like, I really want to watch this documentary about cricket. And I was like, oh, no. Can we not just watch, I don't know. And I swear to God, the minute it started, I was completely sucked in. These people, their stories, the way they spoke, the music, like you say, the victory. I mean, you couldn't have... I was on the edge of my seat. It was one of the best sport documentaries I have ever watched. And I'm so glad it's so... close to the, and like you say, it's close to the wire.
There are some teams that resonate with people. I mean, the great Brazilian team of the 70s, for argument's sake, and the 60s and the 50s. My father, for argument's sake, was a great lover of that team. And then there was the Welsh rugby team of the 70s, that played with a certain thing. This West Indies team had that, didn't they? It was like, they were social commentators, MPs at the time, like Norman Tebbit, famously saying, if you don't pick your cricket team, you don't deserve to, really sort
That's
of,
right.
Now we would see them as racist things. And there was something about Viv Richards and how he looked and how he conducted himself and how he played. You were going, well, I'm on his side. I want him to win because he's amazing.
There were the two things that I think you really get from it. It's what you've touched on there, Vic, is the eloquence and dignity of them as older men talking about and looking back. And then just the style and ferocity of them as athletes. Simply just letting the sport tell the story.
A piece of history, a story I would not have heard of. It's like that. It's important. It's, I would definitely tell anybody to track it down and watch it. Because it was something, again, I wasn't aware of, and it is important stuff.
Well, there's an amazing bit in there where Clive Lloyd realises he has to fight fire with fire, and Australia have this ferocious bowling attack. And he goes in, and just the terminology, he recruits the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Famously Roberts, Holding, Garner and Croft. And he finds these bowlers who will take on the Australians, and they become as ferocious as them. But there's one incredible moment in there where they bowl a ball at Viv Richards and they nearly take his head off. And it cuts to Bunny Whaler is talking, and he talks about Viv Richards being the physical embodiment of the Rastafari. And he goes, when you shake the lion's tail, I won't do the accent obviously, the lion's going to give you a roar. The next ball that comes down, Viv Richards whacks it up and just hits it. And you just go, there's somebody that's not taking a backward step against you. And it's thrilling to watch. It's thrilling.
And that's the other bit I love as well about this, is that they do go to the islands, and you do hear from locals and people like Buddy Whaler obviously as well. So you're hearing how important it was back home in the Caribbean. For 2 reasons. Number one, because of facing adversity. But as you say though, Johnny, it's a funny place. It's because they are islands. So there's rivalry between them.
That's right.
But suddenly they're united under one flag, and it didn't always happen.
No.
But they all came together as individual. I mean, Viv Richards famously from Antigua, I think it might have been the first player from Antigua to play on an international level. So he had to prove himself.
Yes.
Seemed to did okay.
Just about the best ever. But it's interesting as well because Viv and them, they all went to Somerset to play, to Taunton.
That's right.
And got on brilliantly with Ian Botham, who seemed much more of a fit to the West Indies team than that England team that were much more sort of, certainly then, stuffy and stayed in establishment. And here's this West Indian team swaggering in with the music and just, knocking the ball out of the park. Not just, like you're saying, against England, but all the teams across the world. Astonishing.
As a massive cricket fan, I've always held with this, and I think a lot of people think like this, is that cricket's only ever really healthy when the West Indies team are healthy.